Good morning, Team McAuliffe. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2021, and we will now begin our day together with morning announcements. Please stand quietly and respectfully for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now have a moment of silence to think about what we are going to do to make our day peaceful and happy for ourselves and everyone we encounter. Okay, so we have no birthdays for today, but we do have our March challenge, and Miss Moulton has that for us. I looked it over, and it is an important reminder for not just for today, but for every day. Take it away, Miss Moulton.
Good morning. Happy Monday. This is Mrs. Moulton, and I'm a little bit sleepy this morning. But today's March challenge is treat others as you would like to be treated. So please be extra kind and gentle to everyone you meet today, whether it's in person or on Zoom or in your house or in your neighborhood. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Miss Moulton, for our challenge for today. Now, students, you've probably noticed that I have a different background today. It's our March Book Madness bracket, and that's because I'm bringing you today the winners of round 1 and the books that are going to be moving on to round 2. Your votes have been counted, and the winners have been decided, so let's get down to it right now. In our first matchup of the series, we had All the Way to the Top versus Bo the Brave, and you voted for Bo the Brave to move on to round 2. Making it down here to the second matchup, we had Lift versus How to Solve a Problem. We tallied your votes. The book squaring off against Bo the Brave is going to be Lift. Now moving on to the second part of our green bracket, we had The Oldest Student versus The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver. Moving on to round 2 is going to be the longest book in the March Book Madness Challenge, The Oldest Student. And now all the way down here, we have Hands Up versus Your Place in the Universe. The book coming out on top is all the way at the bottom. Your Place in the Universe will be squaring off against The Oldest Student in round 2. Now we also voted on the blue bracket, and we have 4 more books making their way into round 2 of March Book Madness. Starting at the top once again, we have Double Bass Blues versus I Am Every Good Thing. Moving on to round 2 is going to be I Am Every Good Thing. Squaring off against it will either be Pacho Nacho or Evelyn Del Rey is moving away. This was the closest matchup. There were only 20 votes that separated the winner in this one, and the one coming out on top is Pacho Nacho. Moving down to our last matchup in round 2 of the March Book Madness Challenge, You Matter went against Soaked. This book got more votes than any other book in the competition so far, and that is Soaked. Moving on to round 2, and it will be going against either We Are Water Protectors or The Camping Trip. Moving on to round 2 down here is The Camping Trip. So now we have our Elite 8 for the March Book Madness Challenge. You will keep on voting to determine which books move on to the final 4. But before we start voting, let's check out who our 4 new matchups are. Okay, so that is your Elite 8. We will be narrowing that down to our final 4 this week. All votes will be due by Thursday to see which books move on to that final 4. But before we get there, we didn't get to show all of the books that have made it to the Elite 8 in the morning announcements. So we'll start doing that today. And we're going to kick it off with the longest book in this year's bracket, The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. It is by Rita Lorraine Hubbard, and it is being read to us today by Callan of the Lowell High School women's basketball team. Let's check out the oldest student right now.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Callan. I usually go by Callan, and I am the girls' team manager for the varsity team. And today I'll be reading The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned How to Read. Whenever young Mary Walker was tired, she would shield her eyes from the sun and watch the swallowtail skies dip and score above the trees. "That's much what it'd be like to be free," she said. But Mary didn't watch for long. Even at only 8 years old, she knew the first rule of the Union Springs, Alabama plantation she lived on. Keep working. She knew the second rule too. Slaves should not be taught how to read or write or do anything that might help them learn to do so. Mary didn't stop working. She didn't learn to read either. But at the end of each long day picking cotton, totaling water to Papa and the other slaves who chopped wood for the train tracks, or helping Mama clean the big house, she would lie in her little bed next to the crumbling fireplace and think to those birds. "When I'm free, I'll go where I want and rest where I want. And I'll learn how to read too." When she was 15, it happened. Mary and her mother, brothers, and sister were free. The Emancipation Proclamation said so. What it didn't say was how a family with nothing except the checkered garments on the backs could find food, clothes, and a place to sleep. Mary's father died, and the family was on its own. Across the fields and through the woods, ex-slaves surged like waves crashing hard to shore. Now that they were free, every road was a freedom road. Many headed north and west, and every which way, searching for long-lost family members or simply experiencing what the wonders of being free was like. Others, like Mary, chose to stay in the South. An organization called the Freedom Barbuni helped those who stayed to find shelter on abandoned Confederate land. Mary and her family settled in a one-room cabin. For the next few years, she worked alongside her mama to feed her siblings. 7 days a week, she churned butter, cleaned houses, and cared for other folks' children. The hours were long, and if Mary was thirsty or hungry or needed to use the outhouse, she would have to wait until she got home. At week's end, she would offer her mama the only lonely quarter she had earned. One day, Mary met a group of evangelists on a roadside. A woman with soft wrinkles in her kindly face placed a pig and a beautiful Bible in Mary's hand and told her, "Your civil rights are in these pages." Mary didn't know what civil rights were. She only knew that top to bottom, front to back, and that books were filled with words. "I'm gonna learn how to read these words," she vowed, but not today. Today there was work to be done. And tomorrow too. When Mary got married, her and her husband worked as sharecroppers, renting someone else's house, using someone else's tools, and planting someone else's seeds to farm land they would never own. After they harvested crops, almost all the money they earned went to pay for the housing, tools, and seed costs. Mary was 20 years old when her first son was born. She opened her Bible and marveled at the squiggles inside. There had been no time to learn to read. A friend wrote Mary's son's date of birth in the Bible, August 26, 1869. Then Mary dipped a pen into an inkwell and made her first mark inside. Not a letter, not a name, just a mark. It was the best she could do. One day, Mary's husband died. She married again, and the second son was born. Then a third. Mary made marks for these sons too. Now she had 3 growing boys. More money, that's what we need, she thought. But the only other jobs available to black women were as maids or nannies or cooks. The hours were long, with only half a day off on Saturdays. Like sharecropping, they didn't pay much. Mary sighed. Words would have to wait. For the next 4 decades, Mary sharecropped and did odd jobs to help support her family. In 1917, Mary's family moved to a little city, Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was the year of Chattanooga's Great Flood. The story was in all the newspapers, but Mary could only study the pictures to understand what happened. By now, Mary was 68 and too old to sharecrop, but she continued to work, cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. She also fried fish, baked cakes, and sold sandwiches to raise money for her church. On Sundays, she would sit in the congregation, and as the preacher spoke, she would clutch her family Bible, the Bible she could still not read. When Mary was well past 90, she and her husband sat in their creaky rockers while one or another of their sons read to them. After the 2 younger boys died, the eldest read. Then Mary's husband died. Several years later, her eldest son died too. He was 94. Mary had outlived her entire family. She was 114 years old and alone. Couldn't read, she said. Couldn't write. I don't know how to do anything. Mary stood at her window of her retirement home and gazed down at the world below. Words were everywhere, on billboards, on buildings, and store windows and trucks. She sighed. All this time, she thought, and they still look like squiggles. Mary had heard about a new reading class held in her building. She pursed her lips. No waiting, she decided. Time to learn. Out of her apartment, into the elevator, and down the lobby she went. When the elevator's doors sprang open, Mary saw new people sitting under a sign with a picture of an open book. She could not read the words. A neighbor walked up to her. "That's a reading class, Miss Mary. Can I help you over?" She shook her head. She grabbed her cane and lifted her chin and walked straight toward that sign. For the next year and more, Mary put everything she had into learning how to read. It wasn't easy. After all, she was the oldest student in the class and probably in the entire country. Could someone her age learn how to read? She didn't know, but by God, she was going to try. She studied the alphabet until her eyes watered. She memorized the sounds of each letter made and practiced writing her name so many times her fingers cramped. She learned to recognize sight words, then challenged herself to make short sentences with them. She studied and studied until the books and pages and letters and words swirled in her head while she slept. One fine day, Mary's hard work paid off. She could read. Word of her accomplishment traveled, and people everywhere celebrated with her. Chattanooga's mayor, newspaper journalists across the country, and a man from the U.S. Department of Education said, "Miss Mary Walker, I pronounce you the nation's oldest student." All shared her joy. She felt complete. She still missed her sons, but whenever she was lonely, she could read in her Bible or looked out her window to read the words in the street below. From then on, Chattanoogans honored Mary's achievement with yearly birthday parties. In 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson sent well wishes on Mary's 118th birthday. And in 1969, President Richard Nixon did the same. Mary was now 121 years old. Mary received many gifts over the years: a radio, a sofa, and her first television, a new Bible, and the key to the city, and perfume and champagne from the Canadian Mounties. She also received something that brought back those long days in Alabama cotton fields, her first airplane ride. From the cockpit window, she gazed at the trees and rooftops below. No different than a horse and a buggy ride, she joked, but she knew it was. As the airplane dipped and scored like the swallow-tailed kites of a long ago, Mary decided that flying was a lot like reading. They both made a body feel like free as a bird. Each year, before her birthday celebration came to an end, someone would whisper, "Let's listen to Miss Mary." The shuffling and the movement would fade away until not a sound was heard. Then Mary would stand on her old legs, clear her old throat, then read from her Bible or school book in the voice that was clear and strong. When she finished, she would gently close her book and say, "You're never too old to learn." And guys, that was The Oldest Student, brought to you by Callan. And here in Lowell, books always win.
Okay, so there's The Oldest Student. It is squaring off in round 2 against Your Place in the Universe, which we will show on tomorrow's morning announcements. So while you're waiting to watch that one, you've already seen the first matchup in round 2. You've seen Bo, the Brave, and you've seen Lift. So you should be able to make your decision between those two. If not, those links are still available in an email that I sent to your parents, and your teachers have them in case you want to rewatch one or both of those before you make your decision on that first matchup. So, moving on to ST Math. We want to keep the momentum going that was so strong during our ST Math challenge, and so we are going to feature the top puzzlers each week. Here they are for last week.
Good morning, my McAuliffe School friends. So I have some interesting updates to share with you I'm very excited about. So even though our challenge is over, I wanted to keep tabs on how you are all doing with your puzzles. So I went in and I found who our top puzzlers were for the last 2 weeks. Now I did it last week, but I had some technical difficulties, so I didn't get to make a video. So this week I'm going to share with you March 1st, that first week where we weren't having a challenge, and see who those top puzzlers were that week. And then this past week, again, we weren't having a challenge, but I wanted to see if I could see who were our top puzzlers. So first I'll share with you March 1st through 5th. Okay, so now let's share last week. Okay, so I'm so excited to see so many different names, that it wasn't just the same students doing the same thing over and over again. More kids are coming through and doing their challenges. I'm so excited for all the puzzles you're doing. Mr. Anderson and I have cooked up, or in the process of cooking up, another challenge for the month of May. So we'll be all excited to share that information when it's a little bit closer. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep tabs on you each week, and I'm going to share out who our top puzzlers of the weeks are. But you have a great week and keep doing those puzzles.
Great job, everybody. Keep up the great work. We will continue to feature those top puzzlers each week on Mondays on our morning announcements. Maybe next week your name will appear there. I think that's all of our announcements for today. Remember, McAuliffe students are stars. That means we strive to do our best. We take responsibility. We're always positive and kind, and we respect ourselves and others. If everybody remembers to be a star today, then we will have a marvelous Monday. Have a great day, McAuliffe School.